The evidence is so clear that he was on the plane. And the evidence is clear now that he was told in May that he's in the files. But he just can't admit it. He won't. And instead, they're going with the attack. And I have to say, I have been stunned at some of the people who are falling for it. So Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche is meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell and her attorney right now. And they are interviewing her, in effect. Of course, Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted for assisting Jeffrey Epstein in a variety of crimes. The question I have is, what exactly are they hoping she's going to tell them? And why would she be considered credible? Now, I have a theory on this. My theory is the only thing that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche wants to hear is Ghislaine Maxwell saying Donald Trump didn't do anything wrong. And if she can say that, they're going to want to hear from her. And remember, she has an enormous incentive at this point to say that. Why? Because the president could pardon her or give her clemency and set her free. Now, would he do that? I don't know. But she sure as heck has an incentive here to want to help Donald Trump if she can. And this comes as a number of new reports are ensuring that this story isn't going to die. Now, you may remember, those of you who listen to the show regularly will know that I have been saying for months, since March, that I thought the likely reason that the files weren't being released was because Trump was in them. Doesn't mean that he did anything wrong or illegal, but that he's in them. If you're going to talk broadly about files being information about people Epstein hung out with, Trump was going to be in it. And that's why he doesn't want it to be released, was my speculation. It's also then what Elon Musk later said. But that's, of course, not what the administration is telling us. And now we learn from reports from the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times that Trump was told in May that his name was in the files. That isn't a blockbuster revelation, as far as I'm concerned. Of course his name is there. We've long known his name was there. But this comes as more pictures and videos are coming out of Epstein and Donald Trump. I mean, this one was from a deposition of Jeffrey Epstein, one of the civil suits, in March of 2010. Here is the question and answer from Jeffrey Epstein.
Have you ever had a personal relationship with Donald Trump?
What do you mean by personal relationships?
Have you socialized with him?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
Now, that doesn't necessarily prove anything, but in a political context, it's not helpful to Donald Trump that is coming out. My question is, why is he lying about this stuff? Why did he lie about flying on Epstein's plane? Said he never would have flown on that stupid plane, and yet we know now from the Ghislaine Maxwell trial that he flew on it one of the planes 7 or 8 times. Why did he lie about whether he was told that he was in the files? I mean, this was a question that was asked of him. This is number 22 on the tarmac this is July 15th. This is about a week and a half ago. Here's what he said.
What did she tell you about the review? And specifically, did she tell you at all that that your name appeared in the
No,
file.
she's given us just a very quick briefing, and in terms of the credibility of the different things that they've seen. And I would say that, you know, these files were made up by Comey, they were made up by Obama, they were made up by the Biden,
It is clear that Donald Trump is living by the motto that Roy Cohn apparently taught him decades ago. There is this movie, The Apprentice, that came out about Donald Trump. He was not happy about it. It had Sebastian Stan starring as Donald Trump. And I thought of it recently because this is the strategy that Donald Trump is using. Never, ever admit that there's ever a problem. Always declare victory, point the finger at other people. Listen to this clip from The Apprentice. This is number one. This is Sebastian Stan as Donald Trump.
Attack, attack, attack. If somebody comes after you with a knife, you shoot him back with a bazooka, okay? Rule 2, what is truth, Tony? What is truth? You know what's truth? What you say is truth, what I say is truth, what he says is truth. What is the truth in life? Deny everything, admit nothing. You know what's true? What I say is true. And third of all, and most important, no matter how fucked you are, you never, ever, ever admit defeat. You always claim victory.
It's exactly what Donald Trump is doing. Attack, tell your truth, whatever it is, your truth, my truth, I'll make up a truth and deny any wrongdoing. We shall see what happens with Ghislaine Maxwell, but I think she is very much incentivized at this point to help Donald Trump in any way that she possibly can, because he could set her free. And if you think that there's anything else that Todd Blanche is asking her about, and I'm sure there are other questions, but this is, I am certain, all he's going to care about. But look, I still don't think that this is going to, be some issue that's going to destroy Donald Trump politically, et cetera. It's just, it's not helpful to him. And what they're trying to do is now attack, right? And we're seeing the attack coming from Tulsi Gabbard and from Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary. They want to change the subject. They want to stop talking about Epstein. And so they've made up this phony scandal involving Obama. And I've already taken you through why it's phony, because they are suggesting that the intel that they had back in the day, 2016, made it clear that the Russians had not successfully hacked into election infrastructure, and that there was no evidence that any vote tallies were changed. Except, as I'm going to explain to you in a minute, that is exactly what they have always said. Here is Caroline Leavitt. This is number 31 at the White House briefing, trying to suggest that the intel community didn't even have information that Putin wanted to help Trump.
Now, we have even more damning evidence implicating those who tried to sabotage a duly elected president and did grave material harm to our republic. Thanks to additional important work done by CIA Director Ratcliffe, Committee Chairman Rick Crawford over the past few months, a newly declassified 2020 report prepared by the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, which DNI Director Gabbard has declassified, found that the intel community did not have any direct information that Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted to help elect President Trump in 2016. And in fact, Russia was actively preparing for a Hillary Clinton victory. But at the unusual direction of Barack Obama at the time, the intel community published implausible intelligence suggesting otherwise.
So we're going to talk about that. But the fact that the Russians were preparing for a Hillary Clinton victory isn't news. Everyone was preparing for a Hillary Clinton victory. So I went back because I keep telling you all, you should go back and read the Mueller indictments of the Russians, right? And go back and read what was said at the time. So we're 2018 now, right? So the initial intel about the Russians and their efforts to impact the election were confirmed by the Mueller indictments of the Russians. But more importantly, Mueller spent a year investigating it and got into the details, had the proof of what they were doing. So let's end this charade that somehow it's an open question about whether the Russians tried to influence the election in favor of Donald Trump. It is unambiguous that they did that. There were two sets of indictments of Russians. One came in February of 2018. The other came in July of 2018. The one from February of 2018 was the broader scheme to try to convince people by using social media to distrust the election system and also to help Donald Trump. The second indictment was of actual intelligence officers who had hacked into Hillary Clinton's emails, the Democratic committee emails, and then leaked it. So we start with the 13 Russians, and this is from the DOJ summary. And again, if you're really interested, I highly recommend you go and you read it. But I'm just going to read you from the summary from DOJ. And remember that at this time, Rod Rosenstein is the Deputy Attorney General, okay? Trump is president, okay, at this time. And Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein was the one who was overseeing the investigation. He was a lifelong Republican. They talk about the Department of Justice announced that a grand jury in the District of Columbia today returned an indictment presented by the Special Counsel's Office. The indictment charges 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian companies for committing federal crimes while seeking to interfere in the United States political system, including the 2016 presidential election. The defendants allegedly conducted what they called information warfare against the United States with the stated goal of, quote, spreading distrust towards the candidates in the political system in general. Okay, so that's broader, right? That's part of it. It's called the Internet Research Agency. They operated through Russian shell companies. It employed, and I'm now quoting, it employed hundreds of persons for its online operations, ranging from creators of fictitious personas to technical and administrative support with an annual budget of millions of dollars. Talk about the structure of it. They had graphics, they had search engine optimization, they had technology, etc. In July 2016, more than 80 employees were assigned to the translator project. They talk about the lengths that they went to hide the Russian origins of their activities, that they allegedly established hundreds of accounts on social media networks such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to make it appear the accounts were controlled by persons of the United States. They stole fictitious American identities, fraudulent bank accounts, false identification documents. They posed as politically and socially active Americans advocating for and against political candidates. The Russians also recruited and paid real Americans to engage in political activities, promote political campaigns, and stage political rallies. The defendants and their co-conspirators pretended to be grassroots activists, according to the indictment. And here is a critical point that they say in the press release. There is no allegation in the indictment that any American was a knowing participant in the alleged unlawful activity. There is no allegation in the indictment that the charged conduct altered the outcome of the 2016 election. No one was claiming that it altered the outcome of the election. But here, when you get into the details of what they did, and this is now quoting from the indictment, the Russians were, quote, supporting the presidential campaign of then candidate Donald J. Trump. They were disparaging Hillary Clinton. And then, of course, we know that Mueller gathered evidence of contacts between the Russians and the Trump campaign, even though there was no evidence of a conspiracy. Russian computer specialists were divided into day and night teams. They created all these hundreds of social media accounts. Their tasks included undermining Clinton by supporting her Democratic primary campaign rival, Bernie Sanders, according to prosecutors. And there were specific instructions that were detailed in the internal Russian documents. Quote, use any opportunity to criticize Hillary and the rest, paren, except Sanders and Trump, we support them. Mueller identified 30 digital ads paid for by the Russian operation. All of them attacked Clinton or promoted Trump. Quote, Hillary is a Satan, and her crimes and lies had proved just how evil she is, one of the advertisements said. But again, they emphasize that the indictment does not say it changed the outcome of the election. Then, in July of 2018, there is another grand jury indictment, this one of 12 Russian intelligence officers. And these were the ones for actually hacking into the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DNC, and the presidential campaign of Hillary Clinton. They hacked into Hillary's emails and the DNC, and they released the bad stuff. There's no evidence that the Russians were trying to help Trump? How stupid could we be? Come on. I'm going to read again from the release. This is, again, months later, 12 defendants separate from the previous one. All 12 defendants are members of the GRU, a Russian Federation intelligence agency within the main intelligence directorate of the Russian military. These GRU officers, in their official capacities, engaged in a sustained effort to hack into the computer networks of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the Democratic National Committee, and the presidential campaign of Hillary Clinton, and released that information on the internet under the name DC Leaks and Guccifer 2.0. In 2016, officials in Unit 26165 began spear phishing volunteers and employees of the presidential campaign of Hillary Clinton, including the campaign's chairman. Through that process, officials in this unit were able to steal the usernames and passwords for numerous individuals and use those credentials to steal email content and hack into other computers. They talk about the other hacks. 2 officials in Unit 26165 coordinated with officials in a different unit to plan the release of the stolen documents for the purpose of interfering in the 2016 presidential election. Defendants registered the domain dcleaks.com. They later staged the release of thousands of stolen emails. On the website, defendants claimed to be American hacktivists and used Facebook accounts with fictitious names. After public accusations that the Russian government was behind the hacking, defendants created the fictitious persona Guccifer 2.0. Members of Unit 74455 also conspired to hack into the computers of state boards of elections, secretaries of state, and U.S. companies that supplied software and other technology related to the administration of elections to steal voter data stored on those computers. Now, that's important because they don't say they succeeded. They say they conspired to do it. And that's where, again, Tulsi Gabbard plays loose with the facts. And again, they say there's no allegation in the indictment that charged conduct altered the vote count or changed the outcome. And they go through all the charges and all the very specifics, how they were laundering money, how they were transferring the money, etc. There is no ambiguity that they were doing it to help Donald Trump. Now, I don't point this out to somehow delegitimize Trump's win, because again, they said again and again, there's no evidence that it changed the outcome. The only reason I'm talking about this is because they're spewing nonsense to try to convince people that there's ambiguity about what the Russians were up to. There isn't. There wasn't. And yet Tulsi Gabbard goes on about all the things that the Russians had that they didn't leak about Hillary Clinton. So she goes on this list of all these horrible things about Hillary Clinton that they could have leaked that they didn't, as if that proves that they were trying to help her. I come back to this idea of Donald Trump living by the motto that became so clear in this film, The Apprentice, because it is so spot on. Here is the scene where the actor portraying Roy Cohn is telling Trump, this is the strategy that he needs to use. This is number 2.
How do you win?
You want to know how to win? I'm going to let you in on a little secret. There's rules. Roy Cohn's 3 rules of winning.
The first rule is the simplest. Attack, attack, attack.
Rule 2. Admit nothing, deny everything.
Rule 3. This is the most important rule of all. No matter what happens, no matter what they say about you, no matter how beaten you are, you claim victory and never admit defeat. Never admit defeat.
You tell me, is that what's happening here? Attack, attack, attack. Never admit defeat. Never admit you were wrong. Deny, deny, deny. I mean, the evidence is so clear that he was on the plane, Epstein's plane. The evidence is clear now that he was told in May that he's in the files, but he just can't admit it. He won't. And instead, they're going with the attack, attack, attack. And I have to say, I have been stunned at some of the people who are falling for it. I mean, Fox News' Brett Baer was on the air yesterday talking as if this was some serious revelation that changes things. Thank goodness for the intellectually honest conservatives out there, like Andy McCarthy, like the Wall Street Journal, and others, who, despite the fact they're very angry about the Russia investigation, are making it clear there's nothing here.